It's up to the majority of the council, but I mean, I'm gonna stay very low key on it, and kind of just give the department heads the opportunity to go ahead and speak. So, is Mark Williamson here?
He's coming.
I don't see him.
He said he was coming. I talked
So
to
who
him.
did we elect as the minority leader, or the committee chair, second in hand? Do we know? If Jack wasn't here? It was supposed to be a Republican.
It was Mark. Yeah.
Oh, he's Mark. All right, so we-
So I'll wait till Mark gets back.
Now I got your message.
you want me to call- Was he already here?
I don't know. I didn't see him.
I call him. He's here?
My phone might as well be locked in a drawer or something. While I'm upstairs. So
It's not what I called.
whoever's chairing the meeting, can I address the meeting
Okay, good.
first? So, because I have to go to a
Pass them
Catholic
along.
school thing.
Gotta keep kids up.
I can't stay for the meeting.
Joe?
Is Jack on his way?
Oh, we got a lot
As long as
of
we can
important
get
people
going.
there. Don't want
Okay. Frank, are you okay?
For you running, absolutely.
Just to start it, and then Jack can take over. Venice, you okay to start it? Okay. Joe, you okay?
No, I don't think you should. No, go on.
Thank you.
I was like, what?
Okay, so I'll start this meeting at 5:05. This is a committee of the whole meeting to talk about the recent incidents regarding gun violence and violence in general inside the city. I will delegate my time now to Mayor Galimi as he has requested the floor to speak before he has to leave. So
No, I
take the
just-
floor. Thank you.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank all the people from our departments that are here to represent the situation. Both UPD and UFD are here prepared to discuss. I just wanted to address the fact that I also have the Chief of Staff here to not only discuss what we've been doing in real time, but also, if need be, provide accounts. While many of you were there from the Public Safety Accountability Board meeting that happened, there was a town hall on Monday as well. Regretfully, I have something to attend for Catholic Schools Week, so I will be in the meeting, but when I part ways, I do have another commitment that I have to make, but I will stay until then. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm just passing around some statistics that the chief of police did send us. Each council person got it. It might be a little easier to read on this spreadsheet, as I couldn't read it on my email. So I appreciate you, Chief, for sending this. I'd like to start off, if we could, everybody at the table introduce themselves, and then we'll go from there. So, Mike, we can start to the right of you.
Officer Joshua Harrington, President of the Utica PBA.
Tom Carcone, President of Local 32, Utica Professional Firefighters. Jim Noon, Assistant Fire Chief.
Mike Gentile, Chief of Staff.
Mark Williams, Chief of Police.
Noonan, Deputy Chief of Police.
Mike Curley, Lieutenant.
Thank you very much. Chief, I mean, obviously, everybody knows why we're here, so if you want to briefly just touch on the two recent incidents that happened with two juveniles inside the city being murdered, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure. So this month of January, we've had two homicides. One victim was 15 years of age on the west side, and the other victim was 17 years of age on the east side. For whatever reason, during the month of January, we always see a spike in gun violence, unfortunately. And this year is no different. Last year, we saw 6 people shot, so 1 homicide. This year, we're at 4 and 2 homicides. I do got to give credit to the men and women of the Utica Police Department. They do a great job. Up until these 2 homicides that we've had, we haven't had unsolved homicides since early 2021. We've solved 18 consecutive homicides. And I'm confident with CID that we're going to solve these other 2 as well. Unfortunately, until those are resolved and we can make an arrest on it, the issue that we always face is the lack of cooperation from the community. this is as much a community issue as it is a police issue. We're only one cog in that puzzle. And our job will always be suppression. That's our job. Having said that, what concerns me is the lack of accountability nowadays. It's not unusual during the course of a year, we arrest a juvenile sometimes twice, sometimes 3 times with a loaded handgun. What we're finding, even though we charge them as adults, they get immediately sent back down to the family court system where, unless they actually use the gun and actually strike someone and injure someone with a handgun, they're not going to get placed. They're going to give them services, and they're going to immediately seal their records. Now, there were juvenile stats that were put out by our governor about a couple months ago saying that youth violence is down. What she's not including in those arrest stats is the fact that they didn't include all the sealed records of those arrests that went along with it. So it's not accurate. People talk about bail reform. Yes, bail reform has been an issue, continues to be an issue, and I think if they worked with law enforcement and district attorney leaders throughout the state, we all could have agreed to some type of compromise. Instead, what they're finding out, there's problems and they're slowly reeling that back, but not fast enough. The biggest problem that we have, because there were 3 laws that were passed in 2019, not only was there bail reform, but raised the age legislation. So what happened was we used to hold anybody prior to 2019 under the age of 18, they used to be, or from the age of 16, 17 and above, they could be charged as adults for criminal offenses. With the raise the age legislation, first they feathered it in where you couldn't, the 16-year-olds couldn't be charged as adults, and then the following year they made it 16 and 17 years old. So part of the stats that I gave you on the top of that was to include juvenile gun-related offenses. If you look at 2018 before the raise the age legislation, we see 0 for gun violence offenses. So the start of the 2019, we're now, the category 16-year-olds would no longer be included. It's 1, and then it starts going up from there. And to me, it's a direct reflection of the lack of accountability for these kids that are caught in using handguns. Even when we do catch a youth with a handgun that uses it, and we might be able to get that kid in placement, there's no place to place these kids. When the Division of Criminal Justice Services ushered all law enforcement leaders in and said that we're going to have this raise the age legislation, and 2 things we're going to do is we're going to have placement for these kids, and we're going to have services. The services are lacking, and there's in a lot of places no place to place these kids. If we do, we're able to do so. We have to go to other counties, and they take priority over us.
Chief, can you digress on that? Like, what do you mean they take priority over us? Like, what
So
do you
say if
mean?
Onondaga has a need, right?
I get that.
Yeah, so say if Onondaga has a need for their youth violence suspects, they're gonna tell us, no, we don't have an open bed, or if we're able to get someone there, they're gonna bounce them out and say, come pick them up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which I think that's important to know, because Oneida County does not have any detention facilities. Is
Well,
that-
very few.
So the frustrating part for us is the lack of accountability. Now, we talk about services. They promised years ago there'd be social workers, there'd be services in place for these kids. There aren't. And I can tell you there was a recent Oneida County Youth Council meeting where the social workers are coming out saying, listen, we're afraid to go to these houses and give these services. So it's a problem that's much greater than just policing alone. And again, to the credit of the men and women of our department, I think they do a fantastic job. We took over 125 guns, I believe, off the street last year. Each one of those encounters could be potentially dangerous to the officers that have to make those arrests, but also the fact that it can involve a lot of liability to the city. I mean, all you need is one of these people end up getting shot because they pointed the gun at a police officer, and the next you know, it'll trigger an AG's investigation, maybe a wrongful death lawsuit. And to the credit of these officers, when they're making these arrests and they're getting resisted against, people are running for them, they've used enormous restraint not to shoot anybody, and I'm proud of that. A lot has to go with the fact that we have great policies and training, and the city's been very supportive of the training, and that's what continues to be done. But we're just frustrated on our end because suppression is being done. I think we're doing a very good job of it. And unfortunately, like I said, they have to change the laws and give us back some more authority. The last law I want to cover is discovery. You know, people are saying, why aren't there more police officers on the street? They're out there. The problem is that when they make an arrest with discovery, because we have to meet timely timelines to get these cases into court, it's taking officers off the street for hours at a time, downloading videos, statements, and reports that's going to immediately go to the district attorney's office. So we've been handcuffed over the past several years. We're working around it. And the last piece I want to talk about is how we're solving these cases, these 18 homicides that I talked about. No one's coming forward for the most part and cooperating, giving you witness statements. What we're doing is, to the credit of the guys and the women in the criminal investigation division, they're going through hundreds of hours of videos from homes, businesses, our own poll cameras, and reviewing these and a lot of times identifying the suspects that were involved in these cases. Another key piece of technology we recently obtained that's helping is stationary plate readers. With the stationary plate readers, we put them in prime routes where there's going to be a lot of heavy traffic and known criminal hotspot activities. So we were using that. We don't have enough of these. We'd like to get more. But again, it's all hard police work done by the criminal investigation. A credit to Lieutenant Curley and Captain Fennell. They've done a great job. And just to give you most recent updates, so we had that meeting about youth violence. Actually, it was supposed to be a meeting about public safety accountability. And so obviously the main topic of everybody's mind has to do with the youth violence. But while that meeting was ending, what do? We have 3 more legitimate shots fired calls. That same night, there was a funeral for that last homicide suspect. And on Faxon Street, they shot up a house. They used a semi-automatic handgun with a drum that holds at least 30 rounds of ammunition. And they pretty much emptied it into this house. We also had another shots fired call over on Sunset Ave. There was a bullet that they found was shot through a person's window, and then a third shots fired call that happened in the area of Bleecker and Kasuth and Blandina, correct? Right? But if you look at these households that these kids come from, they're dysfunctional. It all stems from the home. It really stems from the home. I know poverty is an issue, but what we find in these households, these kids are left to fend for themselves. Parents sometimes give up onto us, up on them. They tell them that, to tell us later on that I can't handle it anymore. They need to be institutionalized. Or they pawn them off on a elderly parent who doesn't have the energy to even raise these kids. They're not taught structure. They're not taught respect. And there's no boundaries. And then we wonder why they act up in schools, on the streets, and other places. And the hardcore ones, I'll tell you, I don't think you can turn them around. You can offer services, but if you're going to do any intervention, it has to come much earlier in the schools. And unfortunately, because parenting is lacking, they're expecting government to raise these kids. And in a lot of ways, it's unfair.
So, before I leave.
Sure, go ahead.
All right. So, with everything the chief just said, the administration, our administration, wants to see this meeting be a new catalyst for what we can do to work together. The chief of staff and I will be at NICOM this weekend, addressing a lot of these issues with not only other upstate mayors, but also we will have access to a lot of the governor's staff. Moving forward, this needs to be an effort where all of these data points, all of these discussions, we need to work together, the legislative body and the executive branch of the city, to actually create legislation so that throughout this year, not only will we be putting together actionable arguments as to why with our state officials, some of these things need to change, but also memorializing these conversations in bullet list type format so that you can pass resolutions, hopefully, in support of what needs to change and what we feel is happening on our streets. That's going to allow us together to advocate for more funding for the technology and training we need to solve these types of crimes with or without the community involvement in solving these crimes. It's going to help us assist the school district in garnering more programs and understanding what programs they need to have within their gyms after school and within the city limits. It's going to allow us together to bring the state officials to this building and articulate exactly what happened over the last 2 decades, why we got here, and while it takes no time to fall, it takes forever to climb back out of it. That's the position we're in right now. It's going to take a long time to affect any change on this, and this administration wants to work in concert with this body so that we can go to Albany with a joint message over and over and over again with actionable data points and actionable data and how we can affect change. So that's what I want us, not only just talking about this, but I want to hear from the council after what you feel is the message you want to see, what you feel is the strongest points that you need to emphasize, because we all have different opinions on this, but we all have one situation that we want to solve, which is lowering the incident rate of youth violence. Thank you.
Sure. Sure, yeah, just 1 second. And I just wanted to say, Chief, I think it's very important to touch on that fact that they are getting younger and younger. And I see that teaching in the elementary level.
We've been saying this for several years now. They're younger and younger. We just see the numbers keep on growing and increasing. The reality is that we usually have one of these meetings every year. Every time we see a spike in gun violence. And if the solutions were that easy, I'd be touring the country, selling my ideas. No one has an answer. And more importantly, I'd like to say, this is not just happening in Utica, New York. This is happening in comparable cities in New York State and all over this nation.
I agree. Thank you. And now, Joe, I'll
Yeah.
start with you and then.
Yeah,
work
Chief,
our way around.
I just want to tell you thank you very much, and you guys all on that table, you do a great job, and I can't say anything else. I have a piece of legislation here that that my fellow council people seen it. It's going to be coming. There's a copy of it here, and if anybody wants a paper copy of it, it's basically what you just talked about. I talked to Mayor Galimi before I wrote this. The judge helped me. It's basically a tool for all these guys to go to Albany with. And it's basically everything that you just talked about. You know, it's about raising the age. It's about the 3 buckets. And it's something that they can go to. I'm sending it to our state legislators. And hopefully it's a tool that you guys can go and everybody can fight with, basically like what the mayor just talked about. So I have this resolution, and at our next meeting, I'm hoping that we go full council with all this, and it's a tool for them. It is a resolution. It's, you know, hopefully it's something that they can go down and fight with, because I agree with you. You guys, hands are tied. You pull kids over, in my opinion, somebody gets caught with a gun, they should stay behind bars until they go to trial or convicted or found innocent. They shouldn't be let go so they can go back to the corner store and buy another gun like they're buying a bag of M&Ms. And am I wrong in saying that happens quite a bit, right?
Well, you know, the biggest problem we're seeing now is that we used to worry about them getting in the hands of our youth for manufactured guns. Now they can order online kits for ghost guns.
But if you
And
kept
they can
them,
use the parts of an air rifle or air pistol
right.
to make up the rest of the firearm. I mean, it's crazy.
But in the past, before these laws were changed, they wouldn't have been let go once they got caught with a gun, correct?
No, they wouldn't be. And one of the reasons why we're lacking a detention or youth detention facility. I'll give you an example. Last January, we had a kid, there's no place to place him. They placed him in a non-secure detention facility. They gave him furlough. And he ended up, within a 24-hour period, raping an elderly woman over on Hilton Ave and attempted to rape a 15-year-old on South Street.
Right. Right. So I just want to thank you guys again for taking your time out. I know you guys are busy, and thank you.
Thank you.
Who's the chairman? Are you the chairman? Chairman of the committee?
Judge, I was just gonna go around the room. Joe Beatrice started, and then we're just gonna make our way around.
I'd like to say something.
Sorry,
I think
guys.
except for the chief of police, I think I have more experience in this area, and I've been watching it deteriorate for years. When you are elected a city judge, you had to go to juvenile facilities. You had to inspect them because you would be sending people there at that time. And that was, 20 years ago. Two things developed over a period of, say, 1960 through right now. There was a time when the school system really engaged in the truancy enforcement system. So when people of my age were children, it had nothing to do with race, it had nothing to do with any of that, and all this social comment about everything. What it had to do was the law said you had to go to school. And if you didn't go to school, people showed up at your door. They were called truant officers, and they were from the school system. And they would end up in the court, and they would take you out of the home, and they would maybe put you in what they called the reform school back then, which wasn't a very, very popular place. And for those who remember, it was behind the bank, Adirondack Bank, very large building. And it was really designed for industrial arts, really, that the children who went there wouldn't go to school, they went there and they engaged in industrial arts. Well, everything was on a smaller scale. Now you have a situation that is completely different. First of all, for some reason or other, in the last 5 or 6 years, the criminal justice system started to disappear. It started to disappear before COVID. And then, then the family court got involved in the juvenile crime system, which was never the case before. The state of New York changed the law. They took all these juveniles and they put them out of the city courts and into the family courts. And family court judges had very little experience in criminal law. And of course, as the chief said, what was happening, because this is what the society wanted, in which the politicians usually respond to, they didn't want to incarcerate anybody. Well, there's a lot of merit to that, incarcerating children. However, the one thing that was said here tonight that impressed me the most, and is the one thing that I don't think is going to happen, the state of New York, the United States government spends billions and billions of dollars on things that have nothing to do with the everyday comfortable life of the American citizen, which he pretty much had going for him, even in the days when we had some real organized crime, which was controlled by the federal government and finally eradicated. So what are we saying? You cannot solve the issues of the everyday city like Utica, Syracuse, Rochester, Buffalo, Philadelphia, Chicago, if you are going to ignore the basic tenet, you cannot send people back to an environment that is gang-related or gang, fed, like Los Angeles. That's all there was. And they never wanted to face the issue, because you shouldn't build reform schools. What you should build is placement buildings places of institution of learning where young people who cannot go back to the system they have presently face, they are to be sent someplace where they do not go to jail, and not that thing where everybody goes and lifts weights and does all kinds of crazy things. No, we have enough money to build institutions where they go to school. You are not sentenced. You don't become a sentenced prisoner. It isn't a prison atmosphere. You graduate. You go there and you are in school. You wear uniforms. You will go to class every day. And this is what you'll have to choose. Now, if you can't do that, they'll have another part of the institution for people who don't want to do that. But eventually, the people who would be back just getting older and becoming more of a terrorist within the community, because the guns don't get less, they get more as you get older, you take that out of there. Now, we had nowhere to put them even then. I remember when I went out to Syracuse, and the chief said that there was actually a problem of facilities. So where was the Oneida County, City of Utica kid gonna go? Well, that was really a problem back then. I'm talking 25 years ago, 20 years ago. There was no place. And you would think in all those years, all the money we've spent on every other thing in this state, nobody's ever done anything about that. And I remember when they changed the law about 5 years ago to put the juveniles at the family court, I knew right off the bat that wasn't going to work. It wasn't going to work because it was difficult enough when it was in the city court, because those judges are trained in criminal law. The family court judges were going to be lost. Well, that came into being when I was down in Herkimer serving in the Herkimer family court. And that whole building, except for Judge Crandall, the only one who knew anything about criminal law was me and him. Family court judges didn't know anything about it. The Supremes didn't know anything about it. And there was only one county court judge and one family court judge, and myself. And I wasn't allowed to do it because I wasn't a full-time employee. So I say that it's very difficult to change the thinking of a whole society. Because as you sit here, none of you can ever remember a time when you could go into a store and start stealing stuff in the presence of the owner or even a security guard. And everybody just stands there and watch you just fill bags of jewelry and everything else and walk out the store. Don't you ever wonder how we got to that stage of life where if you go shopping with your wife and you go into the mall and you want to go into the jewelry store and look at some jewelry, a group of 10 people come in there and they're swinging things and everything else? It's a very dangerous situation. Now, the store owner's not going to allow you to, or will, sanction any force. The government has no force there. So everybody just robs and steals and walks out and runs to their cars and who knows. The mentality that we've gotten to at this stage is really very odd. It's never happened before in this country. And now there seems to be a great resistance to admitting the fact that you have a serious problem that starts at a very low age level, and you have to treat the age level for what it is. You can't treat this 14-year-old like he's a 20-year-old. We all know that. We certainly don't want to put him in prison. But there has to be a better place for him to go than to go back to a gang-related, dominated neighborhood, whether it be in New York City or in Los Angeles or in Philadelphia or Chicago or Utica, New York.
Thank you, Judge. I
Simple
think,
as
I
that.
think that the chief touched on that
And
earlier
that-
too, with
and
not
what-
having the
the
detention
point
centers.
I'm going to end with, is, where you cut me off, is that at a local level, our level, the common council of the city of Utica, you are at the mercy of the state legislature. Because all of the things that could solve part of the problems are all completely within their control. The same thing with the federal government, completely within their control. The federal government took down the biggest crime organization in the world. It did that. Yet we have drug dealers dealing all over this country in mass and billions of dollars, and I don't see the same type of tactics being used or seeing big systems falling apart. Quite the opposite. So I'm saying to the people who are out there, don't expect the common council of the city of Utica or the city of Rome or Syracuse or even New York City to solve your problem for you. The state has to understand the problem and start thinking of a different type of society and facilities. Facilities they knew about 50 years and 60 years ago and used, but abandoned. They better start rethinking, like the chief says. When that 15-year-old hands him the Glock, what's he do with him? It'll be very hard for him to get another Glock if he goes home. Well, he'll have another Glock within the next day. That's got to end. And I think unless you approach it from the bottom up, you're just blowing smoke up your ears. And it's not just I don't think it has anything to do with race. Nothing to do with race. Why does it do this? Because everybody gets hurt. It has nothing to do with what color you are. When people are out on the street shooting guns at each other, and you're standing in the middle of it, and you're holding your little baby. It happened on James Street when I was having breakfast, for crying out loud. I mean, it was pretty scary. That never happened in Utica before. And I think that the people who should be sitting here is every state representative should be meeting with the local people and tell them what they're going to do at the state level and start committing those billions of dollars for a roofless football stadium and start thinking maybe something else is more important.
Agreed, Judge, agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Venice, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. I was going to say, I know in the city of Utica, we've been talking in a lot of meetings, different meetings over a long period of time about some of the things that we think are causing the kids to have these problems. And I think Chief Williams hit it right on the head. The meeting we had Monday was the first time we actually started talking a lot about the family structure. For some reason, we've always been afraid to talk about families. And we're finally starting to talk about families because that's a big reason why a lot of these kids are not getting the structure that they need. I mean, we have some people here from the street team, and we have a lot of other people out on the street, police officers and other people out there talking to the kids. But it's going to come down to the families and what we could do with the families. I tell people all the time, there's a parent being in a city in the United States is being prosecuted for their kid performing a mass shooting, and that parent is probably going to go to prison. And I don't think that's the answer to send them to prison, but I think the parents need to start taking a lot more accountability for what's going on. I mean, we could talk to the kids, they could talk to the kids, everybody can talk to the kids until, you pass out. But we need a lot more parents to step up and do what they need to do. I do the gun violence prevention program for our Workforce Investment Board. And after I ran out of money the first grant, they immediately gave me another grant. And it was so fast, and they said the reason was because Utica had moved up on the list. When I first got the money, I think we were number 16, and Gloversville was on there, a lot of the big cities, and some other things. All we were doing was trying to get them in school and secondary school or work experience. I wasn't out on the street like Roosevelt Patterson and his group and some of the other groups talking directly to their face, and I started doing that. And I would ask the kids, well, who's in control of your home? And the first thing out of their mouth would be, why am I do what I want to do? And I told them, we used to have commercials on TV. They used to ask parents, do you know where your child is? We used to have that on TV all the time, do you know where your kid is? And I told them about the time that a lot of the times when the street lights blinked, I was running down Steuben Street trying to get home because my father would be driving up the street to get me. And we don't have that anymore. We don't have parents that are taking the responsibility to do what they need to do to their kids. And I also say that there's a big problem when the discipline rules came out for families. A lot of people don't understand it. They really don't understand that they could still discipline their kids in a certain way. It's not killing them, it's just discipline them. And the kids are lacking discipline right now. And we can't discipline them. I mean, I used to, when I worked for JCT, the outreach, Reverend Maria's case used to yell at me out the window because I'd be chasing the kids around ready to smack them out because that's what I grew up. Not beat them up, but talk to them, smack them on their behind, which that's legal as long as you ain't hurting them. But parents don't know that. The kids are ruling the homes now. They're not going to school, they're getting put out of school, and they're falling into gangs. And that's one of the things we need to talk about with the school district is how we're going to keep them in school and just put them out and not put them on the street. Because a lot of them are ending up on the streets. They're not staying home doing the trainings that they're supposed to do online. They're actually out on the street. And let me say this and then I'll finish up. My biggest fear, and I brought it up to Chief Williams and Deputy Chief Noonan, is that one day we're going to have to face the fact that one of these kids is going to get shot by the police officer because they're not going to have a choice. And that's going to even cause more problems because sometimes people don't realize what the police are doing because we haven't had a shooting of anybody like that in a long time. But it's getting to the point now, ghost guns, guns that are being brought in that are regular guns and things like that. Police officers really don't want to even go up to cars anymore, and they have to be very careful. But one day it's going to happen. You know it's going to happen, and we're going to have to react to that as a city because some people are going to be upset. But it's going to be those people that are not doing what they need to do for their kids that are going to be upset. And if you think it's a few, it's a lot of people that don't understand what the police have to do and what they're going through right now. And I'm hoping that the families start coming out because I was hoping more families will be out here today, more parents. But a lot of times we don't get the parents out to these type of meetings. We can't get the kids that might be involved in gangs or groups to these meetings. And I'm hoping that what's going on at Rebuild the Village will start bringing kids up there, you know, out of the woodwork to start talking about it. Because I tell them all the time, all you're going to do is end up dead in prison or you're going to end up in the hospital. And that's not where you want to go because it's not good. 2 kids getting shot in the head is sending a message to somebody. And it's going to keep going on until the parents step in and stop what's going on, until the parents start allowing their kids to start talking to the police and talking to somebody that's meeting with them, that's out in the street talking to them. Because right now I tell people all the time, one of the things I learned when I was growing up and my father wouldn't allow it in my house was for somebody to come into my house, my uncles or anybody, and tell me don't talk to the police. He would take me to the police if I got in trouble, if he thought I was doing something wrong. I mean, I'll tell you one more story. I was running home, I ran cross country at UFA, and the police chased me all the way home. And I got in the house, they knocked on the door. My father, the first thing he said was, when he looked out the door, go handle that, because it's for you. Because I just ran in the door, and I told the police officer, well, I was run cross country for UFA, and I was just running home. but somebody had been breaking windows over at UFA. So parents have to take responsibility to make kids stand up and take responsibility for what they're doing, because if they don't, we're never going to get anywhere. I'm finished. Yeah.
The rules and regulations that the state have put on that we're gonna try and fight is gonna take a long time. That's not gonna happen overnight. We need to know what you need now to stop it. We need to give you everything possible that we can give you to stop this, to saturate these areas where it's happening, to stop the hot spots, whatever you need. We gotta give you. You gotta let us know anything that we can do to help stop it now. The problem is now. One more kid tomorrow is one too many. Getting these rules to the state and what the mayor's doing is great, but that's not gonna happen overnight. We've got these problems happening every day right now, and we need to give you, you're the police, we don't know what to do. You know what to do. You gotta tell us what we can give you to help you. The community's definitely gotta be a big part of it, there's no question there. The community's gotta help. We gotta get community leaders if we can. But we need to give you now the support you need to get to these areas, saturate them, and stop it now, not wait, because one more is one too many. And all that we've been talking and what the judge was talking about is great, and it's great to fight it and try and stop it. But that's not gonna happen overnight. We're a council in Utica, in the city in Utica, we're small. We need to take care of our own problem, and we need to give the police the support and backing that they need, and the supplies they need, anything they possibly can use, we need to give them now. Because I don't want to pick up the paper tomorrow and see that another person got shot. So whatever you need, you bring to us, and we're going to try and get it for you. Because that's what it's all about right now, what you need now here. Not, it's going to be great to stop the laws that are terrible, that we all agree are terrible. There's not a person here who don't agree that all these laws they passed are terrible. But you need more tools now. That's obvious. You need more people. You need more people on the ground. You got to saturate these areas. That's what's going to stop it, presence. And anything we could do to make you get that, come to us with it, and we'll try to get it for you. At least I will. I hope everybody's a part of that, because I hope everybody here is sick of seeing this and needs to give these people more help. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. So I'm here in part to learn. I'm here in part to learn from each of you as much as possible. So as I look at these statistics are kept on suspect information.
Victim and suspect.
Victim and suspect. Okay. So, you know, as the judge noted with respect to these state laws, terms of a path forward locally, local legislation, and I tend to agree with what the judge said. Are we in a situation where we cannot make local adjustments because of the current state of New York law? Is that how we see it?
I know you can't superstate New York State law by creating local ordinances that would conflict with it. Having said that, one thing I would like to make clear is that I'm not for incarcerating every kid, but they are trying to force kids into diversion programs that are violent. And those are the kids that repeatedly offend and are violent in the community that need to be taken off the streets. Diversion programs are great for low level offenders, but not for serious violent offenders who repeatedly commit offenses. They got to be taken off the street to protect us all.
And Chief, have you or the UPD looked at alternate programs or housing? Housing came up. Options that may be available locally, whether within the city or working with county officials in that regard?
So one of the problems we're seeing in law enforcement is that since I've been on the job, our role is expanding into the community. Who thought we'd be handling homelessness, substance abuse issues, and mental health the way we are? And what's done is it's increased the amount of work that we're doing. We are working with organizations for homelessness and mental health, The problem is the mental health system is broken. And when we talk about youth violence, we haven't even touched upon the mental health issues that these kids are suffering from.
And speaking to mental health, because I did hear you speak on Monday night and that came up,
Yeah.
statistics on mental health pickups by the UPD, have they increased overall and for juveniles over the past few years? Can you speak to that a bit?
They have, and I can
Okay.
actually provide you the numbers. So we were, in the year of 2022, we were somewhere in the area of 1,250, I want to say, mental health calls. And out of those, I think somewhere is about 750 mental health commitments out of those calls. And then last year, what we saw was it increased by at least 200, somewhere in the 1,400 range, and over 800 mental health commitments.
And speaking of age, so if we have a 14 or 15-year-old picked up, is that case treated differently than a 17 or 18-year-old who's picked up in terms of where that individual is brought, or?
It does. They're still brought to the hospital, but however, we need to make sure we have a parent with that juvenile, because otherwise the hospital staff will not, provide any services until they have an adult there. And sometimes they can be problematic because of the fact that we can't locate a parent. Or the parent that called us, one of the reasons they've been assaulted by the child was having a mental health episode, so it is treated differently.
Okay, and in those situations where you mentioned you can't locate a parent, what happens at that point?
We have to try to find a next of kin, maybe
Okay.
a cousin or aunt, someone they can take a guardian role for the child.
Okay, I appreciate it. Like I said, I'm here to learn from all of you, so I ask these questions to learn more, to see, if we're not in a position to be able to, create local laws to make adjustments here locally, to create alternate routes to, again, as Councilman Carcone said, assist where you guys do need it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Joe, I think early on you mentioned housing. I'm not sure if you're referring to secure detention. We've been working with Marion Buttonshine and Joe Griffo and County Executive Vicente to get secure detention at the House of Good Shepherd. However, it's been met with roadblocks and red tape. I know they've been working hard to get those beds available to us, but it's been very difficult for them to get that forward.
And I will say in defense of Senator Griffel and Assemblywoman Buttonshine, they've been fantastic to work with. They are trying to help us with these recent criminal law reforms that were in place, and it's falling on deaf ears in Albany, but they still keep on trying. We even send a contingency of our command staff officers with them down to the governor's mansion to talk to her staff. And we expressed what our concerns were, and even they told us it's an uphill push.
Sure,
Change.
and I do think our local state representatives being in this area are familiar with the issues facing this area. Unfortunately, the state of New York is in a lot of ways directed by what's going on or what isn't going on in New York City. And we can only do so much up here because it is different in a lot of ways, I think, than New York City. But having the population they do have in New York City, a lot of these state laws are directed by that area instead of up here where we are. So, again, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to piggyback on what Chief Williams and Bennett said. The family's broken. My education started in the house. I went to school. It was an extension of the home. If I did something wrong in school, I got punished. I got sent home. I knew I was going to get it twice as bad. I want to thank the teachers today because I know their hands are tied. They can only do so much. I've had friends who went back to school to become substitute teachers, and there's just no control in the classroom today because the kids aren't accountable, and that starts in the home. And I don't know how to fix that. And the state, how many years ago? 30 years ago, they shut our state hospital, and they make the people our neighbors, and shame on the state, They've kind of dropped it to the cities and the communities, and we need more mental health. We need more, education, but we got to fix the family, and I don't know how to do it. And I want to thank the chief And I want to thank the teachers, because, you're the front line, I worked in mental health. I used to see everybody come in and it's a bad disease. They don't care if you're rich, poor. Mental health is terrible, and we need to fix the system. And I don't know how to do it, but in support, I would do everything in my power to help the police department, the first responders, the EMTs, to give them the tools they need to make us safe. And thank you.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that, and just, how do we fix the homes? I think that's the big conversation we have to keep having. There's a lot of this that we're never going to arrest ourselves out of. Today, with kids, social media is such a different beast that we're up against, and I think what they're exposed to and the access of things that they have is just a whole different world. But I did have a couple questions, and I wanted to touch on, first one's not really a question, but what I did love about Monday's town hall meeting was a lot of people had questions, and there were a lot of answers kind of right on the spot. Snug was present, was able to explain things. Somebody, they want to know where funding went, and I think it was Marcus and the chief, you were able to touch on, we have body cameras now, and I think there's a lot that the city has been doing that we need to promote better to the community to give them that peace of mind. And I think, these numbers are horrific, but I believe that because of our teams in place, that's also why they're not higher. And I think we are doing some things right when I compare us to other cities. But to get the numbers lower is definitely the goal. That said, I did want to know two main questions, really, is what is the average length it takes to solve a homicide? Do you have that data?
Depends on the case itself. Some are more complex than others. You don't want to rush an investigation if it needs more work. And all these homicide investigations, we were working hand in hand with the district attorney's office. Obviously, we always have to reach the threshold of probable cause to make an arrest. With the DA's office, it's a lot different. They want evidence beyond that when they go to trial, because they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. So, again, to the credit of our criminal investigation division, we work closely with the DA's office. Depending on the complexity of these cases, some don't get solved. And one thing I am very proud of the past years when we have been resolving all these homicides, do you know what the national clearance rates for homicides nationwide is? And it's falling.
What is that?
It's 52.3%. It's almost half the homicides not being solved. And according to the report I read from the FBI, it's getting worse because of a lack of community involvement and cooperation with the police.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for that. The other question I had was, a lot of the guns, how many, do we know how many are from out of state in these that are involved?
We track them. I don't have the numbers now. We get a report from the ATF because we have to enter all these guns into a national database. And what we're finding that a lot of these guns are coming from southern areas where gun laws are more relaxed. Virginia, South Carolina, Georgia, to name a few. But what's the real game changer is the ghost guns. That's the game changer, and it's what's also very scary is the weaponry we're facing out there. I mean, I mentioned drums being placed and extended magazines into these semi-automatic handguns. There's also another piece of that puzzle. They can put in, I think it's called an auto assist, where you can bypass the firing pin, correct? And it can make it a semi-automatic fire like 30 rounds in 6 seconds.
Wow.
So-
What is the percentage? Do we know the percentage of ghost guns right now?
What's that?
Do we know the percentage of ghost guns in
I
these
don't have
cases?
that number,
If,
What I
yeah,
can tell you is we're seeing more and more.
more.
especially in the younger kids' hands.
Yeah. And the other question, so I know we had, was it 35 poll cameras were already in the city and then we purchased 40 more? I don't know if anybody has those numbers. But I've been curious of how many actually have been put up, because I know you said on Monday a lot of
Yeah.
it's Verizon and National Grid.
So we have right now 35 pole cameras. We have some locations where we have pole cameras that were initially installed back in 2007 from a grant. Those are old analog cameras. They also pan tilt zoom, that means they're constantly moving. We've had shooting scenes where the camera's moving and we missed a part of what had transpired. We're in the process of replacing them. The cameras we got now they're phenomenal, great quality, and they cover a 360 degree range. So, but again, the problem we faced was putting more cameras up. We're facing a lot of bureaucracy with both National Grid and Verizon because they own the poles. And to put this equipment on their poles, there are certain guidelines we have to follow and mandates before we can put it on there. So,
So we're still waiting to put those
We're working
last
through that. We
ones.
seem like we're getting somewhere with that. It just needs to continue.
That's something the council can do. Anyone knows anybody at National Grid?
I'll call them.
That's the biggest roadblock. to
Okay.
National Grid.
Yeah, no, we definitely need those up. And then, I've been looking at other models, and I hear and see that, like, what Schenectady is doing with their schools, and I hear that their violence is down a lot. Have you heard much about their, it was the Therapeutic Crisis Intervention Program, or have you guys looked at other models of
So I
what they're
know
doing with the
Chief
youth?
Clifford out there, I could certainly call him. We actually had a conversation at the Chiefs Conference over the summer. He didn't mention anything about a program with the schools, but I could certainly look into that. I can tell you this much, as you know, we have a crisis response team that works with a licensed clinical social worker. And we are making our ways into the schools now to help resolve some of the conflict. With the conflict that we see, a lot of it's driven by social media beefs. And whatever happens outside the school will find its way in the school and vice versa. That's why the communication is critical with the police in the school district. But it's certainly a challenge. And then you got school teachers on top of it. They're afraid. I mean, it seems like lately that there's been a lockdown in the school at least once a week.
Yeah. The Schenectady program is something the administration has looked
Cool.
into, and we actually have, we're planning on meeting with the Schenectady mayor, and something we've introduced with the school district in preliminary conversations and stuff too. Definitely, we understand the schools being a major resource, both in infrastructure and obviously they spend the most time with their children. So looking at how to utilize those while not putting an additional burden on school staff and teachers is really kind of where we're at right now.
Appreciate it. Yeah, that concludes my questions. Thank you.
One thing I would like to add, though, we have someone in attendance that does, in my opinion, God's work, and that's Roosevelt Patterson.
Yeah.
Him and his team, the street team, they go out there, and we need more Roosevelt Pattersons out there. They try to be mentors to a lot of these kids that have been falling into the life of crime and try to give them a better life and give them direction on that. Unfortunately, there's not enough Roosevelt Pattersons. We have a snug team that just recently started up. Despite that they're in the infancy stages, they're doing great work as well. It's just that it's going to take time. So when we talk about approaches to addressing gun violence, it's a twofold approach. One is going to be suppression, the other one's going to be a services approach. And that's where Roosevelt and his snug team comes into place.
Great.
Chief, you said the national average for solving homicides is
52.3%.
and then ours,
It was 100% since over the last 2-3 years. It's been 100%. Now our goal is to solve these other two.
right. I just wanted to reiterate that, because that's a huge deal that.
Yeah, but what's important is this: every unsolved homicide is going to lead to retaliatory homicides. So we feel the pressure to get that done.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for coming today. Thank you, people in the audience. I appreciate that you're taking it. I got a broken one here. But anyways, am I on? All right, well, thank you, everybody, for coming. I was a parole officer for about 30 years, and I served in upstate. I served in Syracuse, and I ended my career here in Utica. I witnessed a lot of what's going on in the streets here, but just back up a little. You know, there was never a child born that was born a killer. There was never a child born that was born a burglar or hated people. What it all comes down to, what I see in my years on the job, is that it's the intervention between between the families and keeping their kids safe and showing and giving them a good household to live in. But when you have babies having babies, that's not the case all the time. And it's really not their fault, because the family that they might have come from might have been dysfunctional as well. So I think one of the things that we could sort of concentrate on and figure out is how do we intervene with these families, these babies having babies? How can we help them out? What are the organizations out there that could assist them and get them to take care of their children a little more? One of the questions I have to pose to our great police force, and I mean that seriously, is how are you working with, let's say you come with a family that they're having a child that's having problems, and let's say it's a lone mother, a single mother. What type of resources are you referring them to, and how is that working so far?
It could be a net account of social services, but there's also with the SNUG program, depending on the nature of their need, SNUG has resources in the state and some funding. They could potentially help out a family, depending what the nature of the problem is.
Right, but SNUG is sort of new, right? Are you seeing any? Is it been so new in the area here? Have you seen an improvement? Do you see where it's actually working, or is it too soon?
I think you'll never be able to put a statistical number of how successful it is. I will say this, to their defense, it's in the infancy stages. We're hopeful it's going to end up working. I will tell you that when it comes to SNUG, it's a one-way communication. We give them information about known gun offenders so they can do intervention, and they will not give us any information back to us.
Understandable.
And they have to do that because they have to protect the workers.
Exactly.
Because they can't be seen as snitches to the police because it can endanger their lives. So that's pretty much how the program is.
Right. Well, I hope that works out, and I'd like to see that. And what other organizations do we have out there that, let's say, a single mother could contact if she's having problems with her son, or she's just having her own problems emotionally, that you're sending them to?
The only other ones I could think of offhand would be the social workers and the counselors at the schools.
Mm-hmm.
Mobile crisis assessment team.
Uh-huh. But is there any long-term type of assistance they're getting?
Social services is not my bag, my man.
I'm tracking.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know.
All right.
I don't know.
It's maybe look at the schools.
Yeah. I don't think that's working. What are some of the things, we're coming up on a budget this year, and what are some of the things that you think you need, that you think would assist you this coming year?
Great question. So we went to Schenectady about a couple of years ago. We wanted to see, because they have a very extensive poll camera system. They have well over 300 cameras in their city. They also have officers that they're hired back either through the district attorney's office, through the police department, to monitor those cameras for crime in real time. And it's been very successful out there. We pale in comparison with only having 35 cameras. We'd like to build up this system. The other thing is license plate readers. We need a lot more of those. But here's the thing. I don't want to put the burden necessarily only on our council or our taxpayers, because there's a cost to this. Every camera that's put up, it's with all the ancillary costs, including the camera. I talked to Frank Matullo. It's $8,800 per camera to put up.
How much did you say?
$8,800. So what we have applied for is the Division of Criminal Justice Services has put out a request for proposals for a technology grant. We put in over $1 million in request.
Mm-hmm.
They're supposed to be announced the announcement for the funding sometime either later this month, well, it's almost over with, or into February. So we hope to hear, and hopefully I won't have the burden of the taxpayers or yourselves with trying to get more equipment. But I think that going forward in the future, we need to continue to build our poll camera system.
Mm-hmm.
It does play a critical role in all these investigations.
Have we met, have we brought the power company in to discuss this with them and all? And how are we working through that?
So I know our previous mayor had initial discussions with National Grid. I don't know how that fared. I know that it didn't really work out well, but recently, with the help of Kevin Rivera, I did get a point of contact of a person with National Grid. I placed him in contact with Frank Matullo, our IT person, and he's going to meet with him.
Good.
Visit some of the sites where we're looking to put cameras up and see if we can resolve this.
All right.
The administration has made contact in some of those areas as well as working with the county executive and Kevin Revere in that area.
Thank you, Mike. These juvenile repeat offenders, how do you track them, the specific juvenile repeat offenders? Are you keeping track of who they are and a list, and are these the people that you're turning over to SNUG to see if they're working, or how do you work it? Is that how you're working that?
Great question. So, make a long story short, we are fortunate in our city that we have one of, I think, 9 crime analysis centers that's funded by the state. Ours is known as the Mohawk Valley Crime Analysis Center. We have a total of 4 civilian analysts as well as law enforcement officers that are part of the Crime Analysis Center. And what they do is they have a point system that's been approved by the state of the most violent gun offenders that are out there. So in the past, when we used to have a gun violence issue, the old approach is setting up roadblocks and ticketing everybody and making our presence known. What we found that wasn't effective. We were pissing off the good neighbors that live in that area.
Like throwing spaghetti against the wall, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now ours is more a strategic, targeted approach. We go after the known gun offenders in known hotspot locations, and that's the way to address it. So recently, we reached out to the state police just to make sure we have some extra visibility out there. They're ready to do the same thing I just said. I said, no, we need a more strategic approach.
Right.
And we're going to provide them with the information they need, and they're going to make sure that it's along the lines that it should be.
Great. All right, well, thank you very much, and I appreciate y'all being here again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Chiefs, everybody here. So I obviously went around the room, so if I repeat myself on a couple of questions or a couple of statements, I apologize. I think everybody hit the nail on the head when it comes to the state. I think the biggest problem with the state is having to admit that they're wrong in a lot of the laws that they made. And I think even going back to a couple years ago when we had this meeting, we have 2 more years of statistics to go by. I think it was, 2022 was the last time we met with some of these statistics. So seeing that increase is definitely something that is eye-opening to me. I mean, back in 2022, 11 juvenile gun-related incidents, and so far, when this was printed out as of 1/25, we've already had 2 in 2024. So I think comparing those numbers, it makes it a lot easier for us when we put in that resolution back in 2021 to go to the state and say, hey, listen, bail reform needs to be adjusted. However, now we have numbers to go by to show that, what you're doing is failing us. So unfortunately, we with the number increases, we do now have statistics to show the state that something is definitely wrong.
One thing I would like to clear up is there's this one that says person shot, that B2B is bullet to body shootings.
Bullet to body.
That could be homicides or people
Right.
that survive.
Bullet to body.
Bullet to body.
Shot but not killed, right?
It's both.
Oh.
It's both.
And we went back and talked about hotspots. Now, when you put these pole cameras up, are these adjustable pole cameras? I can't quite remember. So if, say, one hotspot area is no longer needed, are you able to move those cameras to another area, and so on and so forth?
They can be moved, but again, it's about getting. There's an installation issue that's got to be moved again.
And National Grid is really the problem, because I know I haven't had this brought up to me that National Grid's been the issue in purchasing those pole cameras. So I think that's something that needs to be, no, I know, for them to install them, that needs to be addressed. A representative needs to come and speak to this council as well.
So these cameras that we're talking about are meant for long term. So if it's a, you know, we identify hotspot locations through the crime analysis center, we have a list of locations where we like cameras. The idea is that they'll be there long term. We do have cameras that are portable that we use for various locations that they can easily be moved. These cameras that we're talking about today are long-term cameras.
Right, and then obviously the goal.
They can be moved, but.
Obviously, the goal is to have a camera on every corner, especially in those hotspot areas. So I guess that goes back to, I mean, now are we in contact with somebody? So say, for example, I think the last incident was off of Rutger Street. Was it Mason Street or the last homicide? No, Smith Place. So like, I know that there might not have been a camera there. Has that been identified as a spot that needs to have an immediate use? Or do you go based on where you think that the higher statistical rates of a hotspot
So what we
are?
do is, through the Crime Analysis Center, we rely on their statistics to tell us where the cameras should go based on Part 1 offenses and the violence of, and whether or not, how much violent crime is in the area. So that could end up being one. That ends up in our radar, but.
Yeah, so I mean, like a homicide in a certain location, that location would not necessarily be a hotspot. It might just so happen that the person, the target of that crime was at that location at that time. Doesn't mean that location is continuously bad, right? So it wouldn't necessarily be a hotspot right away. So they look at the long-term data, say all this stuff's going on here, and they rank them. That's how they determine where the cameras go.
And I get that, and I guess going back to look towards the incident that did happen, if, say for example, there isn't a camera, somebody gets shot there, who's to say that another person wasn't gonna go back and commit a crime there?
Yeah.
You know, and I guess that goes back to the point of trying to actually solve the crimes and getting those into those areas, so obviously
Back to the chief said though, there's, you know, you remember, a lot of people have cameras in their homes, but for us to get that camera footage, it has to be cooperation, right? We know that there's cameras that probably captured incidents that we're investigating, where people are telling us either they don't have camera footage or they're telling us how to solve it.
And are you allowed to subpoena that camera footage if it is related to a homicide incident?
Yeah, we could apply for, to seize that if we possible. But here's one of the issues that's kind of interesting. Ring camera service, that recently just came up. Ring approached us about 4 or 5 years ago. They asked to be part of this, their new app they called Neighborhood. And what they were able to do, and we ended up signing for the program, is that if we had a crime in an area, they would send out alerts to all the known Ring camera users in that area. And since that, because it's been bought out by Amazon now, they changed the rules.
Just this week, right?
Yep. So now they won't send those same alerts out anymore on our behalf.
So not even at all. So like say for example, we're at Kennedy Plaza. It doesn't give you the notification that an incident happened in the area of Kennedy Plaza anymore?
Yeah, so this neighborhood, we used to be able to request that within a certain geographic area, that we were requesting for anybody willing to give us video footage of a possible crime in that area. And they just discontinued the program.
And this, I guess this goes back to Mike Gentile, and maybe you can help me out on behalf of Mayor Galimi. Have we looked at increasing our ability to look at nuisance abatement on properties in high crime areas and holding people responsible? Because I know that lacked with the previous administration.
Yeah, that's definitely a priority, just in the process.
Well, I know on behalf of the Public Safety Commissioner, they're usually the ones that initiate that type of, charge to go forward that, so.
And that will be a priority of the public safety.
Okay, all right. And I won't keep everybody. I just got a couple more questions. Back to the fact of obviously, incidents in schools, and we looked back at the last 2 homicides. I think that obviously because these are school-age children, a lot of people think that these kids are in attendance of schools on a day-to-day basis. And I think that part of the problem that I have, as a mother of children that are in the Utica schools and a teacher that are in the Utica schools is, some of these kids that are involved in these serious incidents are not school-age children. I mean, are school-age children, but not actually in attendance of schools.
Alternative ed.
And I think that needs to be, reiterated, that this direct violence is not although they are school-age children, it's not happening inside the schools as much as you think. And I asked Deputy Chief Noonan for those stats on those gang students involved in gang and how that relates back to how many of them are actually in these schools. And I think that that's maybe an important statistic to kind of reiterate for the public to know that that's not always a direct threat.
The problem with that is that we don't know who the students are. The school district has a nice tool called School Tools. It's a platform, computer platform.
Yeah, I use it.
That
when I remember.
would help us be able to share that information back and forth. Right now, they're contemplating whether or not they're going to give it to us.
So let me ask you a question. Are you looking for the amount of, like, for absences, or are you what are you looking at School Tool to utilize from the district?
Basically, next of kin notifications, God forbid somebody gets hurt or shot. Or in the middle of the night, someone ends up missing. We're looking for information for a parent, just someone. Or, more importantly, if we know it's a student, because as I said before, these problems that happen outside the school will continue in the school. I can't give them that communication if I don't know that they're students.
See, and this is a problem that I had when we had this discussion with the school district here and allowing our police officers back in the school, because this should have been negotiated and not rushed into the fact of giving the council and the administration the time to discuss this with the school district, of those officers that are employees of the school district in the city to have access to that type of information. So is that anything that could be negotiated through that?
We're currently talking to the superintendent. I'll be able to get access to that.
So she's working through the legalities of it. They're talking to their attorneys. So our police officers aren't employees of the school district anymore. So I think she's trying to determine if that access can be shared with non-school district employees.
That's interesting, because I know that, well, I mean, some of them are contract employees through the school district and they have access to school tools. So that I would be curious to know what would be the difference of having a police officer there and access to it, another employee. So that's that. And I guess really, and talk about, I guess, from a labor standpoint, and I asked PBA President Harrington and local President 32 Thomas Carcone to be here as well. And I know we talk about it from your standpoint of being an administrator and overseeing these types of employees, but I think it's important to know the labor aspect of the union and how your representation handles from that component as well, because I think that's an important part to know. So I appreciate you here. I would like to give you some opportunity to speak on that as well, if you would like.
Go ahead first. This is your issue.
I think there's a lot of pressure on our police officers now with the Attorney General's office. Anytime our police officers make any move with anyone, use of force, no matter what the extent of it is, or they're scrutinized by the state of New York quite a bit beyond what they ever were before. So we have more police officers hesitating to do things or nervous about making a move when they need to. So if we're in a situation where and we show great restraint, our officers show great restraint, but if we have to use force, it's deadly physical force, I think they're a little more hesitant to do that because the state of New York goes after every police officer so hard. So it goes back to the state. A lot of times our hands are tied in those situations. So the unions are defending these officers that are involved in those things, and it takes a toll on our officers, on the chiefs, on the city of Utica, and it's just a tough situation to be in for our police officers now with the state of New York and all the rules that they've made. We could always use more police officers for specialized units, but we understand also that the city has a budget, so it's not always possible, but we're always looking for grants to have more police officers, and that's been approved to add on, but we could always use more to have specialized units to target certain crimes throughout the city.
You want to add anything, Don?
Sam, I'd like to respond to that. I think now you have a council that's more aware of what's going on, and we're behind the police a lot more. So you're not a target of this council. You got the backing of this council. So I don't know if that's gonna help, but I hope everybody here agrees with me that now we gotta work with the police, not against them, and, you know, help them out as much as we can. That's the only thing we could tell you on that part.
We appreciate that.
This is obviously a police issue, so, I mean, there's not too much to say. As far as from our standpoint, our employees are scared on the street also. I mean, we're wearing ballistic vests, helmets, everything else that goes along with it, but the police combat this all day long, and they should be commended for their efforts with what they have. What I would like to say is just that I appreciate everybody taking the time today to actually have a public safety meeting. This is something that's long been absent and long been needed, and I commend Councilman Testa for putting it together and the rest of the council people for prioritizing safety and listening to the people that are out there doing this every day. She even took it a step further and invited the employee organizations, which I think have an important voice in the people that are on the street, not just hearing it from management and statistics, but actually hearing it from representatives and the voice of the employees of how they feel and what they could be looking for or utilizing or need. So I hope this continues, and I appreciate our participation in it, and I hope that continues. As far as what I see on the streets, I mean, there's a lot of red tape out there. You know, Councilman Carcone talked about, you know, having police presence, and it's no different than the fire service of having, you know, responding units available and doing our job safely. There's so much red tape out there now that we find our guys doing an hour worth of paperwork every time. We talked about the health and, you know, mental health and substance abuse. We can speak to that because those are actually our patients. We're bringing them into the hospital, and we're losing, you know, available resources for fire protection for hours at a time while we're transporting the patients and waiting for the hospital to take them over. And what we don't realize sometimes, and I don't know if this got stressed as much as it needed to today, is that you can't do the same amount of work with the same amount of people in today's world because of the liability issues, because of the paperwork, because of the red tape, because of the resources being spread so thinly across both departments of public safety that, you know, we really need a lot more people to do the same work and a lot more people to have the same presence. And that's something that's changed throughout my 20 years of public service, 19 years coming up on 20, that I'd just like to point out as part of this. But other than that, you know, we have a true problem in Utica. You know, our guys are bringing these patients in, you know, we're seeing it firsthand. And that problem needs to be rectified, and the first step is meeting together, and I appreciate you guys taking the time, and I appreciate everything the police do to keep us safe and keep our firefighters safe on the scenes while we're getting these patients and getting them out and trying to save their lives. So, you know, hats off to the police department, and thank you, Councilman Testa, for involving the employees' organizations for an employee's voice. And thank you to the council to actually take the time out of your schedules to pay attention to this important issue and hold a committee meeting tonight. And I hope you guys do a lot more of the committee systems, because this is something that should be looked over all year round and not just once every 2 years. Thank you.
Agreed, thank you. And obviously your lack of presence at the circle table has been for quite some time. So I appreciate you both coming tonight. Chief.
Can I just say a couple things?
Sure.
I just want to reiterate a point you made. Our police force is really aggressive going after grants and going after every resource that is out there. So we're in a really good spot, and we can always do more, but we're not leaving anything off the table. We're not leaving any stone unturned. Obviously, this is an issue that needs to be combated from a lot of different areas, but from our police force, you know, we are really looking at every option. The other thing too is on the mental health stuff, you know, obviously the county is doing a lot. We met recently with Upstate Caring Partners, who has the Chubbs building, and they're doing a lot of expansion in the realm of dealing with the mental illness stuff, and a lot of that stuff is really expanding too. So there's good things coming on that end, and really it's just the administration's very open, and I know that our police department and everybody here is very open to any option and any stream that's going to be helpful. And I will just reiterate Roosevelt Patterson and what he's been doing, and the people that he's connected with and has connected us with has been really huge. The district attorney's office has been extremely welcoming to this administration and dialogue, and the sheriff's department. I mean, really, every piece has really been to the table so far, and we're going to continue to look at those resources and provide whatever we can back to the community.
Sure, thank you. And that's another thing too that I was going to actually touch back on the fact is they hosted a county meeting, a community county meeting. What was that in regards? Because I kind of just saw it on Sheriff Mayshell's Facebook page. I didn't know anything about it, but I saw several members.
County youth council meeting that was held, and initially we weren't even invited.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that I would like to bring up because county legislator as well.
Yeah, so,
you know.
So when it was immediately prevented, I think that was the gun prevention was kind of happened as a secondary. We sent Chet as our youth bureau person representative there, but I think that was something that kind of happened late to the game. We did have some representation there, because you were there, Mike Curley was there, but yeah, that was good. But also we had every county department as well as Chief Williams to the mayor's office too. So we had that kind of just bringing family court and the DA's office and all those fashions as well.
One other point I'd just like to make, we realize that technology costs money. And I gotta say, we hired a grant writer back in March of 2022. Since the time she's been there, which would be what, 21 months, she's brought in $3.1 million in grants for the police department. She's done a phenomenal job. And last year alone, she brought in $1.9 million.
Sure, and I think that's great, and I think that the city should have a grant writer for the fire department, police department, DPW, parks. I mean, if we just spent how much money on ARPA funding for a skate park, and Rome just got a grant for $2 million to build one. So I think that really has been lacking inside the city. You know, we could utilize that money for maybe what you're asking for poll cameras and stuff like that. And the last thing I'll go, because I know Mark's been sitting here, so I apologize, but I think it's a really interesting standpoint that you were the last person to go, so I just wanted to acknowledge that I appreciate your patience, and I will finish up very shortly. But I think it's an interesting standpoint that I sit here as a legislator and a teacher in an elementary school. And one of the students, a former student of ours, was the one that was murdered, one of the first homicides inside the city, and he was right across the hall from me for a year, almost 2 years at our elementary school. And I think that it really needs to be noted that our elementary schools are seeing a lot more of, I don't want to say an increase in violence, so to speak, but they're seeing that they can be involved in a lot more at an earlier age. And I think that, to be honest with you, 14, 15 years old is too late to get to these youth. And I know that I would like to see, and I'm not an administrator by any means, but these type of programs, and maybe with target students, being implemented at maybe a fifth grade level, fourth grade. I mean, we had fourth graders that attended our school that vandalized the sculpture space a couple of years ago. I mean, and that I thought was awful. Let alone a couple of years later to see them involved in a homicide and be executed the way they were. So The only thing that I could suggest is a legislator and somebody that's involved in the elementary school system is maybe making a suggestion that a lot of these programs need to be implemented at an earlier stage and a lot earlier. And if that has to start at the fourth, fifth, and even sixth grade level, I think that needs to be recognized, that it needs to happen
You
early
see on
on.
a first-hand basis that the needs of these kids are not being met.
They're not.
They're not.
And Chief, and it's something as simple as like, you know, a student will tell me to go F off. Like, if I have kids there that are their age now, and, you know, my kid wouldn't have any teeth left in their mouth. And I think that's what's lacking is that these are now issues that are pushed off. Like, oh, the kid only told you to go F off. Well, I mean, the difference is that, and I'm not saying that all parents are ignoring the fact that some of their kids are issues. Obviously, I mean, I know that, you know, the parents and of the kids in my class are wonderful parents, and they're involved, and you obviously see it because those kids go to school every day, and, you know, they want to learn and they want to be there. And you know, I'm not talking, you know, specifically to my cases. I mean, I've been very fortunate over the years, but I do see it in other classes, and I think that's a serious problem. And these, you know, brush offs of the earlier stage things, like telling a teacher to go F off, is where the punishment needs to start. And I think that's a huge problem as well.
And we wonder why these kids join gangs or groups. Well, sometimes that's their only form of family they know, their only form of acceptance.
Are they used by older people to do that?
Sometimes they're just youth gangs.
You looked up to Mickey Mantle, they looked up to the gang leader today, and the gang leader's going for that young kid because he knows the young kid's not gonna get in trouble.
Mickey Mantle's not gonna pay your bills.
And the thing that I will say about that, what I do notice is that a lot of these kids do not have anybody at home, you know, and it's not to the fault of the parents sometimes. Sometimes the parents work overnight, you know, and they don't have anybody to oversee that child. I coach basketball, and my team went like 0-9 this year. So obviously, I'm a better baseball coach than I'm a basketball coach. With that said, I had to pick up 4 kids to bring to practice that are in 4th grade on my basketball team to and from practice every day. So I think that, you know, a lot of these programs, and like I said, the city had $64 million in ARPA spending, and public safety and roads should have been a top priority, and unfortunately, they weren't through that whole monetary amount. With that said, I think that, you know, even seeing some of, you know, what's going on in the community needs to be something as simple as giving these kids rides to and from youth programs, because a lot of them don't have that. And, you know, 4 days a week I was taking out of my time, and it's not a paid position, and there are people that are being paid to do a lot of these things. So I think that that's something that needs to be addressed as well. So thank you, guys. That is it. Oh. The one last thing, Joe, and I'll touch on this at our next committee meeting, is that I think your legislation was well drafted. The only thing that I would ask to add is that there's an emphasis on raise the age. And I think that, you know, in talking with the police department and a lot of the things regarding bail form, if you could just add a little blurb that the city of Utica needs to emphasize on amending raise the age. So I'll make that recommendation. I'll draft it up and hopefully add that in.
I'll say one more thing. We've been talking a lot about different things that we need to do. One of the things we all been talking about Roosevelt Patterson and the street team. I'm hoping that this year the city of Utica will give them a little bit of funding. I've spoken to the mayor a little bit, so I know what some of the holdups would be to doing that, because there's money that he's applied for reimbursements, and I'm under the understanding of knowing why that hasn't been paid out yet. But I'm hoping we can get past that and give them a little bit of something, because they are on the street. And I wanted to make sure I said that tonight, and I'm pretty sure the council people would, you know, look at it very closely and approve it. I'm pretty sure they would, but, you know, we do need to do something, because I don't think the past administration did very much as far as funding them, so I wanted to get that in. Thanks.
Okay.
Mark, you're up.
I'm up? Well, we're not going to beat a dead horse. We all discussed it for the last 2 hours. I will say I concur with Venice. It comes down to the parents at the end of the day. I work at Proctor. I see it every day. If you're council people and you get permission from the school district to come into the school, just stand there and watch. All right? I see the disrespect to the security officers. I see the disrespect to the police officers. I see, you know, these kids walk the halls all day long, and that's all I do is walk the halls. And I don't make policy, I have to enforce policy. But after a while, it gets redundant. So I do concur with everything. I mean, myself, Venice, Chief Williams, you all grew up in the same neighborhood, you know, and it comes down to the parents, you know, just like Sam said, if my daughters always, you know, came back at me, they get their teeth knocked out, you know, but the point is, it comes down to the parents at a young age, and they need to be involved with those kids. You know, when does the government start raising their kids? That's what bothers me. It comes down to the parents. That's all I have to say.
Does anybody else have anything to add? No, everyone wants to get home. I just want to thank the fire department, police department, for coming tonight, the labor unions. And I just want to thank you again because we have to spend another night tomorrow together touring the facilities. And I think a lot of, for new council people, I think seeing that what you do will bring to light a lot of the things that we discussed tonight tomorrow at the facilities tour. So thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. That'll be the end of the meeting.
Yeah.